As many of you know, I was arrested in January of 2018 in Ajo, which is where I live. There I'm a volunteer with a number of humanitarian aid organizations, and many of those folks who do that work are in the audience today. I'm just one of many. I was arrested for, in the words of the official Border Patrol complaint against me, giving food, water, clean clothes, and beds to two men, Jose and Cristian, from Central America, and I was charged with the crime of harboring.
Border activist Scott Warren walked out of an Arizona courthouse on Tuesday after a jury failed to reach a verdict in his case. The human rights activist and geography professor was accused of transporting and hiding undocumented migrants.
So we've had a trial in which the jury was hung, the judge declared a mistrial, and the government will try me again in November. We're not here to talk in details about the legal case, so if you want to leave, you can leave. It is very interesting, on a personal note, giving talks on these topics where before maybe a handful of people would show up, and then suddenly this interesting experience of being in the news, which is very new and exciting and uncomfortable, and lots of people show up. So landscape itself is thought of as an open book. You can go out and you can read the landscape in the same way that you can read a book. You can get information from it. You can come to understand it. But be careful what you infer from what you read from the landscape itself. Because the landscape, it also contains power, and it conceals as much as it reveals. So I think in the example of where I live, Ajo itself, and if you go to Ajo, you drive to Ajo, and you get to the middle of town, and there's a very beautiful plaza there. And if you go there and you start looking at that plaza, you can learn a lot about the town, and you can make a lot of inferences about the town and about the kind of place that it is by that landscape. The thing is, that plaza was built in about 1919 by an Anglo mining company headed up by John Greenway, built by an architecture firm from Maine that very much wanted to create a town in the middle of the desert to evoke a sense of place that did in fact not exist. And they built it in this new company town. And when they did that, they essentially completely destroyed the old town of Ajo, which was an O'odham and Mexican settlement that was very old. And they moved everybody into this new town with its plaza. And the town was deeply segregated. And the plaza was in a part of town called American Town, and there were separate districts called Mexican Town and Indian Village. And that plaza itself was segregated. You could not be in it if you were non-white. And the town was built in that way for the purpose of mining, for business, for the extraction of resources. And that sort of orderly separation of the races and the creation of a hierarchy of race was seen by the company as being necessary to produce the commodity, in that case, copper. So when you go to a place like Ajo, the landscape is both an open book that can be read and you can learn things from it, you can look at it, but it also conceals as much as it reveals because it was built by somebody, it was authored by somebody, and it reflects power and those power relations. And we could no doubt do that with any kind of landscape that we see in the border region. And you go to places like Organ Pipe and Cabeza Prieta National Wildlife Refuge and other conservation areas, places that we often think of as not being impacted by humans, but they're still very much authored. Right now, we are facing the construction of a 30-foot high border wall across much of the desert of Organ Pipe and Cabeza Prieta, south of Ajo. And I had a sense of nostalgia for the old border wall. which is funny and it's really troubling at the same time. The vehicle barrier, the Normandy fence, the old 12-foot pedestrian fence, the new 30-foot fence is going to have 24-hour lighting and sensors and all this kind of stuff. And I had this sense of like nostalgia when you saw those pictures in the news of the new 30-foot high panels going up. And so each time we sort of up the intensity of the enforcement landscape in the border region, we sort of normalize that landscape and we normalize the social relations that it represents. So we normalize going through checkpoints, we normalize the scrutiny that we get. That becomes as much of a part of the landscape as the Ajo Plaza does. And oftentimes we forget what's really underpinning that and the social relations that it's reflecting and creating as well. I bring these things up because it's just an opportunity for me to share my perspective and the kinds of things that guide me in the ways that I live here in this place, the ways that I explore the landscape, think about this place and the history of migration, and the ways that migration is both a central part of shaping this place and is also in turn shaped and changed by how our place looks and how it feels as well.